So in this lesson, we will be continuing on with our model of the end tube mount, exploring the slot sketch tool and its various options. So something needs to be said here about the model we just put together. If you remember some of the other parts we put together, including the bolt plate and the backing plate that we modeled, we put the front plane really in the middle of our model. The reason I didn't do that this time was I didn't really want to resolve the issue of some of the angles in here and the fillets. I knew I wanted a 1/4 inch fillet in here, and it resolves out to a 1/2 inch on the outside. But we don't really necessarily need to put the front plane right in the middle of the model here. In fact, we can't do it and maintain the symmetry, but we do have that model geometry available with the top plane and the right plane. Now it'll become apparent once we put our model together and put that into our assembly. Something else that needs to be said here too is that this model probably would be more appropriate, since we're dealing with steel here, as a sheet metal part. Sheet metal part is a different function within SolidWorks. It has its own tools. And what you do is you have a form like this, so you can take it out and make a flat pattern out of it and show where your bend lines are going to be and define how that's going to be bent. But we're going to cover that in a different tutorial. What we're going to be covering in this lesson is going to be the slot. And it's a sketch element up here, a sketch entity in our sketch tab on our command manager. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sketching it on this face. Even though the front plane is going to be in the back face back here, we're actually going to be selecting on this face. And we're going to be using the projected origin. The origin, which is going to be in the back here, is going to be projected on that face, so we could actually utilize that. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and click on that face, and let's go to the slot tool. And what it does, very similar to the rectangle tool that we explored in a different tutorial, is that it gives you a second opportunity here to choose the different slots that you like. And there's 4 different kinds. You choose one up here, and the last one you chose is going to be the one that's going to be default up here. But, oops, that's not what we want there. But you do have 4 different kinds. You have a straight slot, your center point straight slot, and then 2 other ones that are also going to sound familiar, the 3-point arc slot and the center point arc slot. And the 3-point arc and the center point arc sketch out just like a 3-point and a center point arc, which is really convenient. So we can click on any of these, and it gives you a second opportunity to choose the one that you want. So we're going to start with the straight slot. We're just going to go through each one of these things, and I'm going to show you how this works. You can or cannot, if you desire to, add dimensions. I kind of like having dimensions on these because as a single sketch entity, putting those dimensions in there kind of helps define the model really quick. And it's actually only 2 dimensions going to put in there. As you can see from these figures down here, that you have 2 different choices for the dimensions. The width of the slot is always going to be the diameter of the arc on the top. And it's the same thing here. It's the width of the slot and how that's measured. You can actually measure the slot between the 2 center points of the arcs on either end, or the total extent of the slot, whichever is convenient or most appropriate to your application. So we're going to do perhaps this one overall length. We're going to choose a straight slot, and you notice that with the images up here, you have some numbers associated with the dots, or the points that are associated with the slot we're going to be sketching out. This one applies with a straight slot, as the first point is going to define one end of the slot. Second point is going to be the second end of the slot, and the third point is going to define the radius, or the part of the width of the slot. So to demonstrate that, let's just go ahead and draw that out. Let's make our model normal too. Oops. Sorry about that. I'm going to click on that face. I'm going to make that normal too. We're going to go back to the slot tool. We're going to go to the straight slot, and we're going to start with the origin. So if we click on the origin, that's our point number 1. Point number 2 is going to be the width of the slot. We're going to make that approximately 1.5 inches. And it's going to be the length of our slot. And then the width of the slot is going to be our third point here. So length of the slot is going to be 2 inches here. And the width of the slot is going to be 0.5. And that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward. What it does is incorporates a lot of what would be sketch geometry in here, sketch relations, and incorporates that into our document here. We could add additional ones in here. If we were to click on the side, we can make that horizontal if we want to. It's kind of redundant with everything else. What we don't have in here are parallel and tangent and other things. That's kind of incorporated into our design. But if you look down here, now that we've already sketched this out, we have the ability now to go into our parameters and make some changes in here. Because this is fully defined and it's black, we're not going to be able to change any of these parameters in here. But if we were to make this loose, perhaps maybe delete that dimension, delete this dimension, and delete that coincident relationship here, now we have the ability to move that slot around as needed. Because this is horizontal, we can't really rotate that. But with the X, we can make that 0 perhaps. What it's doing is it's considering the very center of that arc. It's going to put it in the X direction, right in the origin. With the Y, we're going to make that 0 too, so it puts that center right there. Maybe the width of the arc, or the slot, we're going to make that 0.5, and the length, we're going to make that 1. Once we make that 1, and some of these are a little bit funny. If you change one, it's going to change the other. And now that we have them all situated here, we have 0, 0 for X, Y. We have our width at being 1/2 inch and our length of this slot as being 1 inch. We can now come back and put in some dimensions in here, perhaps between that arc and that arc. We're going to make that maybe 1 inch. Let's take that center point and put that where the origin is. We're going to make that coincident. And let's click on this and get the radius in that, and that's going to be 0.25. Green check mark. Just double check that. If we put a dimension in here, that's going to be 0.5. It's going to overdrive the dimensions. So we're going to make that driven, and we're going to go to OK. So that's pretty much a straight slot. Let's go ahead and try some other ones. So if we click on Escape twice, we're going to go ahead and select everything that's in there and go ahead and delete that. Go back up to our slot tool. We did a straight slot. This time, let's do our center point straight slot. Instead of measuring from the outside of the arc, let's go ahead and measure from the center point of the arcs on either side. So if we start from the origin and sketch that out, maybe vertically this time, we're going to make this a little bit more closer to the model we're actually going to be modeling here. So click on one point. The 1 point is going to be the very center of our slot. Second point is going to be the length of our slot. And the third point is going to be the width of the slot, just like it was before. We have our dimension selected, so we're going to go ahead and put in this value, which is going to be 1. This one is going to be 0.386. Now, if you remember in a few lessons back, in regard to having a bolt clearance, when we did our whole wizard, the value of that bolt clearance for the close clearance was 0.386. We want to make sure the bolt goes through this with the same amount of clearance that we would expect when we go through the insulation pad. So that's going to be the value we're going to be using, and you'll notice it gets fully defined. Now, part of the slot is it needs to be 1 inch from center to center, but we also want to make sure that it's 1/2 inch from the bottom, because that's where we want to put the origin, and it is. And because that's 1/2 inch, and it's being, it's implied being, it's driving, we want to make it driven. What we're saying is we want to make sure that it's driven by existing sketch geometry. So let's go ahead and rebuild that. We're going to keep our sketch 4, but we're going to go ahead and suppress that and look at some more slots. We're going to look at some of the arc slots that we're going to be playing with. We're not going to be actually incorporating these in our model, but I want to show you how they work as long as we're on slots. So let's go ahead and click on S face. Let's go ahead and click on our slot tool. Let's go ahead and look at our 3-point arc. 3-point arc works just like a 3-point arc slot, works just like a 3-point arc. Our first point defines 1 point of the arc, second point defines the end of that arc, third point defines the radius of the arc, and then the fourth point defines the width of the arc slot. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and click on this. You'll notice that when we add dimensions, we no longer have the capacity of defining how the slot's going to be dimensioned, but it's going to put in dimensions for all 4 of these elements in here. So let's go ahead and make this normal too. Let's start with the origin as 1 point. Just like with 3-point arc, let's go ahead and sketch that out. So that's the second point of our arc. Third point of the arc is going to be the radius of the arc. Then the fourth point is going to be the width of the arc slot. So now we have our dimensions in here. We can make that maybe 90 degrees. Maybe make this 1.5. And we're going to make that 0.75 perhaps, just to be a little bit different. And let's do this. Let's take that endpoint and this point. If we just click on any element on that slot, it's going to give us our slot tool over here. But if you click on another element that's outside of that, we can select that. Now I'm trying to select on the origin. It's not going to let us do it there. But if I select it in our feature manager tree, I can go ahead and get the regular properties manager for sketch elements in here. So here I can make that horizontal. And because I did that, and I could add additional sketch geometry in here and dimensions, it's now fully defined in black. So let's go ahead and erase that. Let's try that again. We're going to go to our slot tool. This time we're going to do our center point arc. So our first point is going to be the very center of that arc. We'll choose the origin down here. Then we're going to choose point 2, point 3, and then point 4 is going to define the width of that arc. So let's go ahead and click on that. We're going to add dimensions to that. That's going to be the center of our arc. Then the second point is going to be out here, maybe 1.5 inches, perhaps. That's going to define the first point of that arc. The second point is going to define the second point of that arc. And then the last point, which is the fourth point, sorry about that. Fourth point is going to define the width of the arc, as we're used to by now. So now we have our dimensions in here. Let's make that 1.5, perhaps. Let's make this 1 inch, just to be different. And let's make this 180 degrees. And if we click on one of these points, you can see that the arc still has some capacity to rotate around, so it has some degrees of freedom. So let's do this. Let's click on that point and the origin, if we can select it. If we can't select the origin, let's go ahead and go outside of our slot sketch here and select that way. And we can make this horizontal perhaps. And now we have that our center point arc slot sketched in. So let's go ahead and erase that. Let's go ahead and rebuild. Now that we have sketch 4, let's go ahead and unsuppress that and take that sketch 4 and go to features, go to Extruded Cut. We're going to make that through, or not through all, but up to next. And it's going to cut it through.